Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today and for the enthusiasm around what's maybe not always that exciting a topic. Google Analytics is a little scary for everybody. And I'm Tasha. I'm the relationship growth specialist here at Yeeboo Digital. And with me today are two of my wonderful new colleagues. I haven't been here that long, but this is Trevor Ryckman, our manager of digital marketing services and our lead strategist, as well as Erik Rubadeau, and he is our CEO and founder. And I'm going to let Erik tell a little bit more about what we do here at Yeeboo Digital.
Just teasing.
Don't scare me like that.
Sorry, I couldn't decide if I was going to do that or not, but I decided to go for it. So hopefully that
nice.
Tone. Thanks, Tasha, and lovely to see you as always, Trevor. Yeeboo Digital, just quickly in a nutshell, really just focused in on kind of three core areas in the nonprofit sector. Infrastructure, WordPress builds, it's the underlying, it's the donation form systems, it's Luminate Online, it's engaging networks, it's all the nuts and bolts, it's things like analytics. We have a fundraising and marketing team that Trevor leads, as well as ongoing support that we work with clients on a regular basis. So, it's very much an attempt on our part to be a one-stop shop from a digital fundraising and integrated fundraising standpoint, to really help organizations do a whole lot more with technology and the internet.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So we had a few kind of pre-planned questions surrounding Google Analytics, and I'm going to just kind of post them to Trevor and Erik both. And if there are questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments. I think this is our first time using StreamYard or trying a LinkedIn Live. So if something's not working, also feel free to send it to my LinkedIn personal messaging, and I'll see it there and I'll make sure to post it over. So our first question we're starting out with, and I'm going to post this to Erik first, is how do you see nonprofits commonly using Google Analytics?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple kind of key or common places that most people tend to look at. I mean, the big one is, site content, right? So how many people are coming to the site? What kind of visitors are we getting? What kind of volume does our site see? And then as they kind of start to look down inside of, okay, well, what's our universe of people coming to our site? It becomes things like, well, what are they doing? Like, so looking at top content, a big one for organizations is Ecommerce tracking, which isn't necessarily an out of the box functioning piece, but it's can be set up pretty straightforward in a lot of different systems, and then that allows you to see one for one, right? Like people are coming to the site and they're transacting, they're making donations. What does that flow look like, right? Where do people come from? And then, where do our donors come from? Are they triggered by, ads out in the universe, or email, or direct search, or, our AdWords, or things like that? So certainly that's a pretty common one, like that, people like to see and sort of track through.
Nice. Okay, that's great. Is there anything you want to add at all to that, Trevor? It's all good.
I think that sums it up.
I know that was a great answer. It's very thorough for sure.
Yeah.
And that gives some great examples of kind of generalized data that we're seeing. And I think a space that the Yeeboo Digital team is often helping and supporting is kind of those specialized custom events. So I'm going to post that to Trevor. But what are a few specialized custom events that we're kind of seeing the Yeeboo team go in and actually set up for nonprofits?
Yeah. I mean, the great part about analytics, specifically universal analytics, is that it is incredibly flexible in what you're able to track as events. We've done everything from, as Erik said, simple sort of e-commerce revenue tracking. Hey, how much money is actually being generated on a specific donation form, through to incredibly customized events like DIY registrations or additional gifts made during a DIY process, personal page donations, team page donations, ticketed event purchases, sponsorships. And, some of our clients have chosen, just based on kind of their digital strategy, to focus on really granular pieces of information, things like information downloads or engagement mechanisms that exist on the website, quizzes, video views, form submissions, whether that be FAQs or email signups. There's really no limit to what you're kind of able to track. And certainly we've kind of done our best to stretch the capability of the platform. Now, you know, a lot of this stuff, and I know there's a follow-up conversation to be had about GA4, but certainly this particular area in events and what is being tracked is categorically going to change for a lot of organizations as they start to transition from universal analytics into GA4. And certainly we've, with a few of our clients now, started that transition and have found a lot of success in kind of migrating, you know, I won't say a one-to-one because there are certainly some things we're still trying to figure out, but for the most part have managed to find either a one-for-one swap or a workaround that seems to at least capture, you know, the major information that was being captured in universal analytics for a lot of these clients.
Nice. Now, one question I have, just because I'm kind of new to this level of Google Analytics work for sure, and I'm learning as I go from the rest of the team, but have you ever, what's kind of like the max level number of customer events, or what's a large number? Have you ever seen a nonprofit, you know, tracking like 30, 40, 50? Like what would be the highest number you've seen of custom events being tracked in Google Analytics?
I mean, we typically don't go past, I would say, 15.
Okay.
You know, I think what's important to remember is, especially in this transition to GA4, which does require a little bit more thoughtfulness around your kind of digital strategy and how you want to improve the performance of, say, a website or your Google Ads campaign, is you need to be pretty thorough. It needs to be a little bit more intentional in terms of how you're thinking about what it is you want to track.
Yeah.
So certainly, you know, there is no limit, but the question we often put back to clients is, you know, for what purpose?
Yeah.
Because either the information already exists elsewhere and it doesn't necessarily require an additional goal to be created or an additional event to be created, or it convolutes the conversation. I mean, you know, as important as something like a download is, are you doing anything with the information that you get from that particular event? Often, you know, if we really spend some time talking to clients, the answer is no. And sometimes it's a vanity metric, and that's okay too. We just want to know, you know, sometimes you just are curious, and certainly those are valid reasons. But I think generally our approach to sort of scoping out, you know, what it is we want to be tracking on websites is to start with organizational objectives.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, I mean, to your question, Tasha, like we have definitely, I mean, I've been working in analytics since I think 2000 and I want to say 6, which is maybe a little while. Actually, back then I got a chance to go to California and do my analytics certification like in San Francisco, which was kind of cool, like in person and live, which they don't need to do anymore. The internet's kind of evolved since then, turns out. But like, you know, certainly over the years, I've seen implementations where organizations are tracking like upwards of 40 or 50 different kind of like just a lot of different custom events. And when we get into it, sort of to what Trevor was saying, most of that data isn't actually being looked at. You know, sometimes, and the thing to know about analytics is like you can set it up and then something can change, right? So you can have all of these, you know, kind of unique customizations, but you do have to kind of keep an eye, like if there's a change in your service provider, you know, if they make an update to how something functions in their platform, or if Google Analytics makes a change in terms of how it does something, there is a little bit of maintenance or like, you know, that has to kind of be considered in these things as well. But you've certainly seen large volumes of kind of custom events, a little less so now than because some of the newer versions of analytics actually bake some of these things that we used to have to kind of hard code track. They're just more like native to the environment now, which is kind of nice.
Nice. And I mean, so much of Google Analytics has really been built around that business process where it's more like business to customer and tracking customers. And obviously there is much about a nonprofit that's very similar to a business, but with some nuances. Do you find that at least in its current state, and we're going to talk about GA4 in a future session more, but in its current state, do you think that there is more customization that's required to truly empower nonprofits, you know, with those custom events to kind of fill the gap of where nonprofits are not similar to other businesses?
Some of the things that might, that wouldn't be natural maybe to other businesses, but well, I'm not even sure if that's right. But like advocacy actions would be something that, like if you want to track those, again, most advocacy platforms are going to have some reporting of their own. But if you want to understand, advocacy inside your sort of fundraising universe or inside your larger web traffic universe, that would be something that might be a little out of the box for, or like a little unconventional in other sectors. I'm sure there's other examples as well, but that's sort of one that comes to mind.
Well, nice. Anything to add on that, Trevor? Or you're good? Okay, awesome. Okay, so my next question is surrounding how does Google Analytics information influence digital fundraising in kind of that nonprofit space?
I mean, I can share a really quick example of something that happened with an organization earlier on. Probably this is back like kind of pre-2010, if you will. And we were talking with an organization, we were implementing analytics, and they were running two pieces of marketing. They were running paid digital advertising and magazine ads that went into the back of some magazines, kind of doctor's office type magazines. They looked at the traffic and they said, okay, well, clearly, because you have to think there was a point where we didn't know, pre-analytics, marketing was 50% guesswork, right? Like what's the saying? 50% of my budget is wasted. I'm just not sure which half. Like now we have a much better understanding of like, okay, well, where does our traffic come from and where do our conversions come from and that kind of stuff. In this example with this client, what they were like, well, our magazine ads are clearly not, they're not working because they're only driving like 5 or 10 people, right? And our digital ads are driving hundreds of people. So we must, they were going to make an investment decision. They were going to can the magazines. When we added e-commerce analytics, what we learned was, yes, the digital ads, these banner ads that you have out there are driving all kinds of traffic. Not one of them becomes a donor.
Wow.
And then on the flip side, the 15 people that are coming in from these magazines, every single one of them became a donor. So that level of insight was about to, without that level of insight, that organization was about to make a decision that they were going to guess which 50% of their marketing was working properly, and they would have made the wrong one based on a metric like just traffic, right? So it's valuable to have that kind of insight in your marketing, but you need to be able to see the contextual line all the way down, right? Like, so which traffic actually gives, and then you can make decisions about that. So
I love that.
That's one example.
Yeah, that's a great example too, right? Because I think we're all so quick to discount anything printed now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know I shared it and everybody all laughed on my LinkedIn recently about this. Amazon sends out their like Christmas book for all the kids and everything. Mm-hmm. It's nuts in my house. They're still mm-hmm. talking about it. There's lists that have been made. There's pages that are like crumpling because they've been touched so much, right?
Yeah.
And I am one of the first people to absolutely have discounted the idea that a print matters, but mm-hmm. obviously it still does hold a lot of weight, and it could hold a lot of weight because lots of donors or your advocates for your nonprofit could really, that may be the thing that really influences them, and they're never going to be somebody who really is all over your website in that fashion, right? So they're never going to be the person who clicks a banner ad. I don't know the last time I clicked a banner ad anywhere, but
no,
that's
intentionally.
Just me, right? Intentionally, yeah. Accidentally, I definitely have, but with intentionality. So, okay, that's great. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I would add to that, just not because I can't help myself, is like with your print example, that catalog is full of QR codes and no pricing.
Yeah.
Right. And so those QR codes can all have, and like, yes, they can capture data. You can gather data through your QR tools. But if you're using like a free QR tool, you're putting something on your direct mail, you can actually attach those kind of key. So it's campaign, source, and medium, which are kind of like these key tracking parameters that you put on your links. And it gives you the way to see like, hey, turns out product 3 on page 2 or whatever, this QR code that we're giving is driving a ton of our traffic. And you can put all of that in a way that QR code is coming right through into your Google Analytics. So you can do the same thing like that example I was sharing earlier. We redirected people off of that magazine to a custom URL that when they hit it, just got a bunch of Google Analytics data parameters added to it, and then it kind of carried through in the background. So we knew that they'd come from that magazine ad specifically. But you have that ability with QR codes now. I mean, if there's one bright spot maybe that came out of the pandemic. It was for the founder of the QR code, who was nearly irrelevant. I mean, everybody at some point had tried to stick a QR code on something and no one ever looked at them. And now that's how we get our menus. Like there's so much, it's been such a shift in terms of the value of a QR code, and know that you can add those tracking parameters to QR codes in the same way that we do to like digital ads and things like that. And it helps you make decisions. It helps you make decisions on like, where do you spend? Where do you move your, I mean, this is something that Trevor and his team are looking at all the time, right? They're looking at analytics, they're looking at our platforms, and we're looking at like, where should we be moving the media budget, right? Like if we're like, we're looking and saying like, we're getting all this great traffic and that traffic's valuable, but this traffic's more valuable. Do we move our investment over here, increase our return on ad spend, all that kind of stuff? I mean, that's where we can, start to see that data coming into Google Analytics. It's super, super helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think there's even that interesting piece, going back to that crazy Amazon catalog, but even as a parent, I'm humoring them, scanning the QR code to find out how much it actually costs because everybody wants to know. But then you're sucked in and they actually takes you to, that page of the catalog, but you have access to the whole catalog. So what then is the page that sucks people in? Because that might be of value, right? There's so much, I mean, it's next level creepy sometimes where you can, how much information you can gather about a family based on, I'm sure they could probably tell me what are my boys' age? Well, maybe they don't know exactly, but I'm sure they're pretty darn close that they can figure out what age range those are in. And obviously, there's so much about the nonprofit space with, huge respect and privacy and everything for donors, but that information is really, really valuable, right? That it just is. And it's interesting and it influences a sometimes very lean digital marketing budget as well. So how can you make the most of something like Google Analytics to support that? So, and had a little fun comment here, but Dominic, tracking QR codes. I think it's just something we're all not quite there on, right? And we're not quite to that next level. And that's where a lot of digital marketing service folks are kind of just already in that space. So that's great. Anything to add there, Trevor, at all?
I think what we have found more recently as tracking in places like Facebook and Instagram become more, say, frustrating is a good word, is we're using analytics is still quite reliable, especially in the events that are set up because of the way that it's grabbing information. So certainly there's a degree to which analytics, we've shifted in the way that we're using analytics to reconcile against a lot of the ad platforms that have become more challenging. It's certainly, I think it was done in past sort of passively, right? Where you would make sure what you were seeing on your donation form was appearing in analytics. But, I think for organizations that are looking to make faster decisions about their digital marketing optimization, certainly analytics has been a place that we've kind of resorted to as we've lost some of the trust that we've had in specifically places like Facebook and Instagram. And while, the conversion API in Facebook is supposed to be the solve all, it certainly feels like there's more trust to be had in some of those analytics numbers. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that analytics in and of itself is a fantastic tool, but it works best when it's working in conjunction with a variety of other tools. One of the things that we use it most frequently for is user journey drop off. So where are people coming to on your website in their path to a conversion, and maybe what is the holdup to making an eventual donation or taking an action that we want them to take. And while we can sort of see where they're dropping off, what really provides a lot of value is having additional tools, something like Hotjar, for instance, that actually allows us to take a look at user sessions on the pages where we know things are maybe not functioning as they should, or they're not guiding people through to the next step of their user journey. So, using it as a tool in a sort of tool set of other softwares has certainly for us proven incredibly effective as we look to optimize websites and conversion funnels.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really great point too, Trevor. Like what you were saying, like there's so much that can be tracked. It really comes down to like what does the like what does the organization want to know?
Yeah.
Because like you have so many different initiatives, and so it's do we want to understand like how is this investment working? How does this how does traffic that comes from Twitter, how valuable is that compared to traffic that comes from Facebook?
Yeah.
There's ways to look at the value of your traffic, and value doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It can be people, like Trevor said earlier, it can be an event like just people who watch the most of our content, right? Like if we're yes, we want people to support the organization, but we also want to educate, right? And so if we can say, hey, these are education metrics, engagement metrics that we can measure, and then we can say, yeah, okay, sure, maybe maybe we don't make a lot of money from our Twitter traffic, but by God, do they consume our content, right? So as an organization, you might say, well, it's still worth that investment for even putting paid ads out there, because those people become really, really invested in our content. And as an organization, you can make a decision about whether that's valuable to you or not. The same can be said for things like content of your actual site. You can look at the content of your site, and there's, and again, a lot of these out of the box reports are good, but there's so much that can be done with the custom reporting side of analytics that you can say, hey, show me all of my content, and then tell me which page is the page before a conversion. Which page leads to people taking action? And that conversion can be monetary. That conversion can be, engagement. And there's so much that can be done in terms of like answering those questions. And the key is just to spend a little time up front, try to getting it set up. But then also just, as an organization, investing into, asking those types of questions and trying to get those answers, because, it might take a little bit of work to get that one piece of tracking just right, but it can be really, really valuable in terms of making the decisions that you want to make about where you do or don't invest, or, what content you keep, or what you need less of or more of, right? So there's so much that can be garnered from it.
I love that too, because I think, it's really simple to think of digital marketing and the end result being donations. And that's just the most common thing that everyone wants to measure, is that donations piece. But awareness is its own very complicated metric, right? Awareness or impact, or, and they're so nuanced, and the data behind it is so nuanced. And trying to take that Google Analytics information and even maybe using it towards grants. Like I always have great conversations with Ansley Fender of Atlas Solutions, and she's really in that grant space and understanding it and getting that information to go, oh, the awareness, because this video had this many views and this is what our nonprofit does, really could even be a metric to be used in granting, right? And what do you need to measure for your grants and all of that piece. So that's great. I love that.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing to think about too, and just going off of what Trevor was saying earlier about tools like Hotjar and in combination with analytics, is like donation form optimization is one of those, like, if you can just reduce the friction by figuring out where people fall off, what part of the process, and then actually taking that, redesigning things or reorganizing things or adding or removing, changing the image, changing the copy, like being able to use analytics and some of the experimental tools that are in analytics in terms of like running actual A/B experiments. It's amazing, like for an organization that has that runs a decent amount of money through their online forums at the end of year, a 0.2% move in conversion rate can translate into a whole lot of money. And that, I always like to say, like, a lot of people don't end up on donation forms by accident, right? Like you might you might have a little bit of accidental traffic, but like, how do we, if we get 100 people that show up to a donation form and only 30 of them convert, what's holding the other 70 up? And so certainly there's reality factors, right? Like my kids smashed in and I'm just not finishing this transaction right now, or I was trying to do it on the bus on my phone and I got to get off. But like, there's also, like, we all know there's also like real just digital friction. The thing's not working. I'm clicking on something and it's not doing what I expect it to do. And so all of this can be learned and optimized through analytics. It's really quite powerful.
Okay, that's awesome. And so last question, and if people have general questions for us, please feel free to throw them in the comments. But so posting this one kind of to Trevor, but we'd love a quick Yeeboo review of GA4, and that's going to be kind of where our next LinkedIn Live goes. But I'd love your first kind of takes on the move to GA4.
Yeah. there is no shortage of articles that exist online about the frustrations that people are having. And I mean, in our sort of initial usage of it, it's abundantly clear that the product was designed for retail and specifically in integration with applications, right? Like it's where Google makes their money. It's certainly where the majority of advertising takes place in terms of a gross revenue line for Google. So the shift certainly from their perspective makes sense. It has created some friction, and there's certainly a learning curve to be had, right? Like we're talking about not only changes in functionally how the platform works, but verbiage has changed. Things like products are now items, bounce rate and pages per session are now an engaged session metric, which is a combination of the two. It's certainly there's certainly an education to be had, and you know, as everybody here I'm sure has realized, there's not a plethora of resources that Google's providing about how best to use the platform as it relates to nonprofits. Now, with that being said, it is far more flexible. Now, you know, we talked at the beginning about being a little bit more, needing to be more intentional about what your digital strategy is, and getting the most out of GA4 really requires you to have those conversations internally, because so much of the setup of the property involves custom reports that of course can be sort of tailored and created to suit any sort of organizational objective, but you really have to have an understanding of what those are, because it's not as easy to navigate. It's not as easy to sort of quickly find the information that you're looking for. And often, you know, out of the box, there's not some of the pieces that your organization may have been using or we use on a day-to-day basis just don't exist in the same way. So, you know, we've found ourselves, you know, just creating a list of what we were looking at before and what we now need to look at, and often, you know, creating custom reports for ourselves or for clients to access that information on a more regular basis and make it more easily accessible. It's I'm sure a fantastic product for you know, commercial organizations or even nonprofits who have applications and we're looking for, you know, have been looking for a unified view of how their web properties and their applications are performing. But it certainly has required a shift in the way that we're using the platform and the upfront effort that's required to actually extract the information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, super interesting. Eric, did you have anything you wanted to kind of add about?
I mean, I think to Trevor's point, like it's a shift in mentality. We're going to have to, you know, organizations are going to have to get comfortable with a whole new interface, dashboard, nomenclature, data set. Like everything is changing. You know, I mean, like I said, I've been working with this product for longer than I'd like to admit, but like the reality is they've made a lot of changes to it, and this is the first time where the change is wholesale, right? Like you no longer have the same underlying data structure. The database architecture is different. Like nothing transitions from old to new. I am sure that as over time, as we inch towards this kind of sunsetting of UA analytics, we will see more and more stuff coming out from Google. We'll, you know, like there's an integration now with BigQuery that for GA4. Like there are these things that will become really powerful in the long term, but they will, you know, there will be an inevitable bumpy road, so to speak, for the next year or so, while organizations have to make that shift, right? Like you may have invested a bunch into different versions of analytics or custom reporting and things like that, and some of that will transfer and some of it won't. You know, and certain software products in our industry are really really easy, you know, one-click installs kind of things. Others take custom code. Sometimes it's a combination between the two. So there's going to be a lot of, you know, I don't want to say soul searching, but there's going to be a lot of like documentation that's going to need to be kind of done. So a little bit of time is going to need to be spent looking at like, what do we have right now? What are we losing in this GA4 transition? And how do we recreate our needs as an organization on the other side? So, certainly it's, change is an opportunity, if you will. And sometimes it's an opportunity that you get to pick for yourself. And sometimes it's an opportunity that is thrust upon you. And so, in this case, I think big picture, it can be a really good thing for organizations, but it's going to take a bit of a rethink of how we do things right now, how we're going to be able to do things in the future, and, probably just sort of resetting our expectations a little bit, so, we'll flag that if you aren't running a GA4 in parallel to your UA analytics install yet, that's a great thing to get done. I mean, I'm sure here to the end of the year is probably getting a little tight for most people, but even if you can get it implemented in January, it's a good thing to be doing, because you want to start collecting that parallel data and seeing the differences between them and starting to kind of give yourself a little bit of a dictionary between, okay, this thing is now this thing, and the numbers are a little different because it's captured differently. So you can just start to benchmark for yourself as an organization what data is going to look like in this new way.
Nice, for sure. And I'm super excited. I think there's so much about GA4. I've already got a list of things that I was like, there's too much to talk about in this session. And Erik already started on some of it. So just forget everything Erik just said, because we're going to talk about some of it again in a future session and kind of tackle GA4. And maybe even something that, would be useful is almost like the lingo cheat sheet to go, it was called this, now it's called this. And because sometimes that's a piece that, gets missing. And I know for myself, sometimes I'm like, okay, what's the definition of what I'm looking at here in not, high level speak, but just in general, how is this going to affect me as the person who has to actually use this and make it work and take this information and talk to my team about it afterwards. So I think there's going to be so much of fun to talk about in the GA4 conversation. I know a lot of people are really excited about that. So I didn't have any questions come in, but for those of you who have questions for our team later, feel free to reach out. We did record this, so we'll throw this out there to the world again later. And for all of you who came and attended, and thanks for all the lovely comments on the back end here as well. And thanks, Erik and Trevor, for thinking my mad idea in my first month at a new company was a great idea, because I was like, I don't think everybody knows this information. As you guys were telling me about it, I kept thinking, not everyone can possibly know this. How am I? Or maybe I am the only person, but this was great. Thank you both very much. And thanks everybody who attended.
Oh, thank you for pulling us together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Bye, everyone. Cheers.
Take care.
All right.